Monster Hunter Rise brought a lot of changes to armor skills. There are skills that changed completely. Others were improved, and some got nerfed. The set bonuses that we were using in Monster Hunter World no longer exist. They were turned into skills, and some of them were nerfed. In fact, there have been a lot of skill nerfs in Monster Hunter Rise. Normally, nerfs do not affect me. I am more of an adapt or die kind of hunter. That said, there is one that got me straight through the heart. I simply do not understand it. Crit draw was nerfed. What have they done to my boy? Crit draw is by far my favorite playstyle and build type for the greatsword. There are some monsters that I prefer to hunt with crit draw due to their constant and fast movement. Sure, it will never be the best, but it is always incredibly fun. The nerfs that this skill received in Monster Hunter Rise truly sadden me, but before I explain my opinion, it is important that we go over how crit draw works in this version of Monster Hunter. If you already know how the skill works and want to hear my opinion, feel free to skip ahead. In Monster Hunter Rise, crit draw is a 3-tier skill that reads as follows. Increase affinity for a short time after performing a draw attack. The first level of the skill gives an extra 10% affinity. The second level of the skill gives an extra 20% affinity. Finally, maxing out the skill gives an extra 40% affinity. In terms of decorations, it is a level 3 decoration. Also, please note that this skill does not work with Silkbind attacks. From the description of this skill, there are two important points. First, the affinity increase is for a short time, and second, only when performing a draw attack. Naturally, we have two questions. How long does the increase last? And what is a draw attack? Let's find out. Be advised that I am a greatsword user, so I will be using this weapon as an example throughout the whole video. There may be changes if the skill is applied to other weapons. After doing a full round of tests, this is exactly how the skill works. The skill activates when you perform a draw attack. A draw attack is the attack your hunter makes when going from a sheath weapon position straight into the first attack of the weapon. It is important to understand that you get the affinity bonus once the attack activates, not when you hit with the attack. Look at this example. We are charging the greatsword, and it is at this point when we release the charge that the buff activates. You can see at the top of the screen this symbol, meaning that our hunter has received extra affinity. The affinity buff normally lasts about 3 seconds. I say normally because the buff ends immediately if you sheath your weapon or if you roll. Take a look. We charge the greatsword and we activate the buff as soon as we let go of the charge. Now, during the first frames of rolling, the buff has already ended. Take a look again in full motion. So, in conclusion, crit draw gives your hunter a maximum of 40% affinity for a total of 3 seconds after going from a sheath position straight into an attack. Understood? Good, because now we need to take a look at a greatsword specific situation that may come up in your hunts. You see, the greatsword has 2 attacks that come from a sheath position. The first one is done by pressing forward and X. The second one is done by just holding X. Here you can see how each attack looks and their differences. But wait, let's take a closer look at attack 2. If we pay attention at the top, we are not getting the symbol for additional affinity. With this attack, the crit draw buff is not activating. This means that attack 2 is not considered a draw attack, and that crit draw does not work with it. Why does this happen? Well, the answer is that when we do attack 2, we are actually doing 2 actions. First, we are unsheathing our weapon, and second, we are separately starting an attack. Mechanically speaking, we do not go straight from sheath into attack. We actually first unsheath the sword and then go for the attack. Let's break it down so it is easier to understand. Normally, if you press X when the greatsword is sheathed, it unsheathes. If you press X again, your hunter will attack. When holding X to charge this attack, the game still performs these 2 actions, but it does so consecutively. It looks like one motion, but it's not. If we slow it down, here is where the game believes that the unsheath has happened. The rest of the motion is considered the attack. Since the attack is happening after the unsheath, the game does not consider it a draw attack. In conclusion, crit draw does not work if you do your first attack by holding X. In order to get the crit draw bonus, you have to do forward X as your draw attack. Does this make sense? Mechanically speaking, yes. It follows the rules within the game. Do I like it? No. Should it be different? Absolutely. But these are the rules that we play by. This, gentlemen, is crit draw in Monster Hunter Rise. My opinion about this nerf is simple. I do not like it. The reason that I do not like it is that I do not understand why the developers of Rise thought that these changes were merited. Did they believe that making the affinity increase last for 3 seconds was too strong? They nerfed the affinity increase from 100% to 40% at level 3. This is a 60% power nerf. They made crit draw less than half as good in exchange for a 3-second duration on the buff. From a greatsword's perspective, there is nothing useful that we can do in those 3 seconds. Nothing. Taking into consideration that crit draw is a skill that has historically gone hand in hand with the greatsword, they completely destroyed it for this weapon. Logically speaking, it makes no sense that the skill critical draw would be on a timer that affects attacks that are not draw attacks. In my opinion, the skill made perfect sense when critical draw meant that your draw attack would be a critical hit. Now, it's a different type of skill that does a different thing and benefits different situations. What is most curious is that Monster Hunter Rise is the first internationally released game in the series that has made such changes to this skill. After going through all Monster Hunter games that have had international releases outside of Japan, crit draw worked the same in all of them except for Rise. Let's take a look at the history of this skill. Once again, speaking of Monster Hunter titles that were released internationally outside of Japan, we see that critical draw made its first appearance in Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. In this game, you need 10 skill points to activate the skill, and it gives 100% affinity to all draw attacks. This is something that continues throughout the following games: Monster Hunter Tri, Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, and Monster Hunter Generations all keep critical draw the same. 10 skill points to activate, and the skill gives 100% affinity to all draw attacks. Critical draw changes for the first time in Monster Hunter World. This change is due to the fact that World also changes how the skill system works. Whether the old system or the new system is better is a topic for another video. But at this time, we can see that even in the new skill system, Critical Draw can reach 100% affinity on all draw attacks at level 3. In Iceborne, the world expansion, the skill remains the same, and we can reach 100% affinity on all draw attacks at level 3. As we saw earlier, Monster Hunter Rise decided to make this skill 60% weaker, and I find it difficult to understand the reasons. Once the true Charge Slash was introduced to Monster Hunter World, the playstyle of Critical Draw was almost removed. It wasn't just the true Charge Slash. In Monster Hunter World, it was so easy to achieve 100% affinity that Critical Draw as a skill just lost its usefulness. Fortunately, in Iceborne, the addition of Frostcraft put it back on the map. It was possible to use Critical Draw and Frostcraft to create a build based solely on draw attacks and use any remaining space for support skills. It allowed a slower, safer, and more methodical playstyle that was very different from the constant use of true Charge Slash. Still, Crit Draw playstyle was never the best. It was just a fun alternative. The ability to have 100% affinity on draw attacks meant that we could use other greatswords that had negative natural affinity, which brought some diversity to the builds. But still, I will repeat myself, this was never the best, and this was never the meta playstyle. I see no reasoning on nerfing this skill, effectively removing the whole playstyle out of the game for greatsword users. The next point I want to touch on is that Crit Draw was not only nerfed in terms of power, it was also nerfed in terms of availability. I will explain. In Monster Hunter World and Iceborne, the Draw Jewel, the decoration that gives us Critical Draw, was a level 2 decoration. Now, in Monster Hunter Rise, the Draw Jewel is a level 3 decoration. Taking into consideration how difficult it is to fit these kinds of decorations in Monster Hunter Rise, it makes it increasingly difficult to use the skill. The matter gets worse when we compare Critical Draw to other affinity boosting skills like Weakness Exploit. As we all know, Weakness Exploit is a 3-tier skill that gives up to 50% extra affinity when hitting a monster's weak spot. If we compare the two, Critical Draw gives less affinity than Weakness Exploit. Critical Draw has a stricter condition than Weakness Exploit, and yet Critical Draw is a level 3 decoration, while Weakness Exploit is a level 2 decoration. Do not misunderstand me. Weakness Exploit is not the problem here. I believe that Weakness Exploit is a very good skill that is very useful and that is correctly placed as a level 2 decoration. The problem here is Critical Draw and how I believe that it has been overly nerfed for reasons that, once again, I cannot understand. In an attempt to get some clarity, I decided to do some research on what the Greatsword player base thought about these changes. First of all, almost every reaction I have seen is negative. No one seems to like these changes. Every opinion I have read on the matter seems to indicate that Greatsword users believe that this is a huge nerf. I agree with them. But I did not stop there. I wanted to see if I could find some kind of reasoning to justify such destruction of Critical Draw. I found a current of thought that explained that the Monster Hunter Rise developers believe that if they kept the 100% affinity boost, the skill will be too strong because it now lasts about 3 seconds. Honestly, I find this to be a very hard reach. Lowering the skill's power by 60% in order to have it last a few seconds does not seem worth it. If this is the real reason for the changes, I find it to be very poor balancing. There was another idea that I saw multiple greatsword users mention. The second group believed that they nerfed the crit draw skill because other weapons like the longsword would be too strong if it gave 100% affinity, since this weapon has multiple counters that activate from a special sheath that benefits from the critical draw skill. I do not use the longsword at all, so I do not know how true this could be. But let's assume that this is true. If indeed the longsword would be too strong with 100% affinity critical draw, why would they adjust the skill instead of adjusting the weapon? I find it hard to believe that Rise developers would choose to nerf a skill that affects all weapons in order to keep just one of them from being too strong. From a balance perspective, it makes no sense. Obviously, I am very interested in your opinion. Do you agree with these nerfs? Do they affect you at all? What reasons do you think could exist to justify them? Please do not hesitate to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Maybe we can reach some form of conclusion. I honestly cannot understand why these nerfs happened. As I mentioned before, crit draw was a style of greatsword that I enjoyed a lot, so it definitely saddens me to see it be treated this way. Nevertheless, there is nothing that I can do except adapt, and that is exactly what I will do. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope I get to see you on the next one.